Well, here it is March 30th, and we've got basically 3 months in the books now on this new Republican majority. Yeah, there's a lot of time spent there figuring out whether Kevin McCarthy would get the gavel or not, but I think they've gotten quite a bit done in such a short amount of time, including some bipartisan bills that, well, even got signed by the president. One of them did, at least. Some others are going to get rejected, but let's get a real report card on what this Republican majority is doing and whether they're really upholding the conservative principles they said they would. Joining us is a guy who would know, Dr. Kevin Roberts, the man in charge over at Heritage Foundation. Dr. Roberts, good to talk with you again, sir.
Larry, my friend, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
It is early, but you can tell by the way these committee hearings are going and the bills that have been proposed and voted on exactly what the priorities are for this Republican majority. What do you think so far?
Well, considering the caveat that everyone knows that the Heritage Foundation and I are generally more conservative than Kevin McCarthy, even Speaker McCarthy knows that. I'm not being gratuitously critical towards him, quite the opposite. Therefore, we're hard graders, and the grade is really good. I mean, I'm really impressed. I think I could see the potential silver lining of that couple of weeks of so-called chaos, which was not. It was really good that we went through that process to elect the speaker. And you know, McCarthy's a legislator's legislator. I've been in the Capitol every day this week, visiting with leadership, visiting with members who are not in leadership. And I'll just tell you, Larry, things are going really well. They have some hard votes coming up, but probably the thing that impresses me the most is that they're on offense. They're looking for transparency in government, for saving money, for dealing with the border. Obviously, Heritage is always going to be the umpire, call the balls and strikes. And up to this point, Speaker McCarthy deserves a lot of praise.
Well, and historically, Heritage Foundation, of course, has been in favor of a robust national security and defense budget, and certainly that hasn't changed. However, there are grave concerns about what the Pentagon is doing with all of that money. It's not just about buying guns and ships anymore. What more can this Congress be doing in terms of determining, based on controlling the purse strings, exactly how that money is spent at the Pentagon, considering they're having real recruitment problems, and a lot of people think it's because of some of the non-military policies that have injected the conversation there?
Well, there are two big things that it can do. Just today at Heritage, we hosted Congressman Mike Waltz from Florida, who's been a stalwart, not just on the Pentagon spending money appropriately and having a strong national defense, but also to the underlying assumption in your question, getting rid of all of the critical race theory and wokeness in the Pentagon. We know over the last few weeks that high-ranking Pentagon officials have testified to Congress that those problems aren't as bad as they are. But in fact, this panel that Heritage assembled of many experts across America, military veterans, found both anecdotally, but also in a poll they did of military servicemen and women, that 65% of active duty military personnel believe that the Pentagon's woke policies are getting in the way of recruitment and retention. And if you consider that we live at a time when the Chinese Communist Party poses an existential threat to free people around the world, starting with Americans, the Pentagon must do a much better job of A, eliminating all that nonsense, and B, as I have said and my colleagues at Heritage have said, proving to us the military weapon systems it needs, and then we can talk about the funding that it requires.
On the domestic front, Dr. Roberts, I remember you were one of our first guests here on this new program 6 months ago, and you reiterated how important education is to you, that it's been your career, and you come from, if I remember right, your mother was a teacher as well, is that right?
Fifth generation teacher, going back to the 1800s.
So given that, it's not really, a federal issue, what we're seeing at the state level right now with regard to state by state having robust universal school choice and keen observation of the curriculum that's being put forth to children and getting back to basics and getting rid of a lot of that stuff that we just discussed that's at the Pentagon right now. You must be encouraged by the way the conversation with education is going in this country, and that Republicans finally are owning the education issue instead of deferring to Democrats as they had for so many decades.
I'm very encouraged, and you've gotten to know me well enough to know that I don't do hollow optimism. So when I and my Heritage colleagues say that we're encouraged by this, we really are. We're on the ground and in a couple dozen state legislatures, and what we're seeing, as I did in Austin at the state capitol there last week, is a level of courage that I've not seen conservative legislators have. They know that it is essential, not just for the sake of the classrooms today, but for America tomorrow and further into the future, for us to confront this radicalization of our children and taking advantage, Larry, of what I think is the most noble experiment of this noble idea we call America. And that is the commitment that we give equal opportunity to every child in America in education, regardless of where they come from. All of this woke nonsense actually gets in the way of that because you can't love what you don't know. And I actually look forward not just to what's happening now or the fruit of that, but next year and the years that follow, that we actually renew and revitalize patriotism in this country as a result of all of this courage.
Kevin Roberts, when you took the reins at Heritage, I remember you distinctly saying often in many of your media appearances, this is not your grandfather's Heritage Foundation. And I think we saw an example of it just yesterday on Capitol Hill. This is part of your new entity called Heritage Oversight. Let's take a quick look at this.
I don't see if she's there.
How are you doing? Just dropping off some mail for the Congress.
Hi. So basically a few weeks ago, AOC lied about me in a committee hearing.
Okay.
So I tried to come last week and talk to her, but she kind of cowered away, wasn't interested in talking to me. So together with Mike from the Heritage Foundation Oversight, he helped me file this ethics complaint. So we filed that. And if you can give it to AOC, I would really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And tell her to stop lying about American citizens.
Okay, have a good one.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just dropped off an ethics complaint at AOC's office, and unfortunately she wasn't there. So we left, and then I was walking through the Capitol, and guess who I bumped into? AOC herself. I just delivered an ethics complaint to your office because you lied about me in a committee hearing.
Oh, hi.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
so
actually,
I never
you're
inspired a bump for
No,
it.
you're
And I thought
actually
also from
super
the
transphobic, and I never want to share space with you. Thank you.
There we go. That, of course, is the heroic higher-right chick who started the Libs of TikTok account. Boy, that's not just a couple of guys sitting in an office with leather-bound chairs writing white papers, Dr. Roberts.
No, sir, that makes my day. And it just underscores that whether it's AOC or whether it's Congresswoman Katie Porter, who rhetorically abused my colleague, Amy Swearer, on Second Amendment rights, Heritage is on offense every day. In fact, we come into the office every day, into our building on Capitol Hill, and we ask ourselves, have we thrown the ball downfield enough? We have to do this in order to take back America. And this is what I hope, Larry. By virtue of doing that, we not only discourage these nonsensical members like AOC from their misbehavior, but most importantly, we give encouragement to the everyday American who often spends too much time in despair. We really have to get out of those doldrums and out of the trenches in order to take back this great country.
Well, and to that end, we've got less than a minute, but you do travel quite a bit. Is that also part of your mandate there at Heritage, or your personal mandate, that you're not going to get stuck here in D.C., that you're going to get out there and find out what conservative Americans are really wanting?
Absolutely. There are three parts to that. The first is personal. I just wouldn't be willing to live in Washington, D.C. or any big city. Nothing against people who want to do that, but my family and I just like being in the outdoors too much. But the second thing is, to the credit of my board, when they hired me, they said, Kevin, we want you to be outside that city as much as you can. And so it brings me to the third point. The majority of my time is spent outside this area on work trips, and not just to speak, but to use my two ears to listen to the everyday Americans. And I come back here every week reporting to my colleagues what I've learned from just everyday people. And I think that's one of the reasons that Heritage has seen this renewed effectiveness.
Well, it's always good to check in with you and the group there. We appreciate all of the great experts that you make available for our program, and we appreciate the activist work that you're doing right now. And by the way, they're still doing great white papers. I don't want to downgrade that. They make you smarter. Thanks, Kevin Roberts. There's more to come on O'Connor Tonight.